I can confirm that you are now live.
Wonderful. Thank you, Ms. Clerk. So I'll call our meeting here to order and start. I want to acknowledge that the Halifax Regional Municipality is located in Mi'kma'ki, the ancestral and traditional lands of the Mi'kmaq people. The municipality acknowledges the peace and friendship treaties signed in this territory and recognizes that we are all treaty people. So moving along, we have approval of the order of business and approvals of additions and deletions. Ms. Clerk.
There are no additions or deletions on our end.
Okay, colleagues, any declarations of nope. Any declarations of conflict of interest, colleagues? Hearing none. So that brings us to item 4, case 24259, Regional Center Land Use Bylaw Housekeeping Amendments motion. Colleagues, what is your wish?
I can put that on the floor if you want, Mr. Chair.
That would be great.
So I move that the Regional Center Community Council give first reading and schedule a public hearing to consider the proposed amendments to the Regional Center Land Use Bylaw as contained in Attachment A of this report.
Second.
Moved by Councillor Cleary, second by Councillor Mancini. Any discussion on this one there? Councillor Cleary.
Just a couple of questions for staff. So looking at some of these housekeeping amendments, and I'm glad, and I think I had an issue on the daycare use in high order in my own district, and maybe that's what started the change. But just to confirm, when you look at the now what we call institutional use instead of commercial use for daycares, and when you look at the tables and where things are going, because it still now has, when you look at for established residential zones, the footnote number 10 instead of a solid dot, which means, you know, yes, you can do these things, but with restrictions, that everything stays the same for residential use. It's still, you know, you can have it in any residential zone, 14 kids, you know, you don't need to worry about institutional zoning for that kind of thing, because we've moved away from that. Now it's just all these different zones and what the uses are in these tabular forms. So just to double check that, you know, from a small operator's point of view, if someone's running a daycare out of their house, nothing has changed with going to institutional use from commercial use.
Hello through the chair to the councillor, Kasia Tota with Community Policy Team. Yes, nothing has changed for the ER zones. The local commercial uses are, you know, would still be permitted.
Yeah, and the major change is going to be for high order residential. So if you have a building and someone wants to have a daycare in there, like they do up in the Bears Westwood area, now they're allowed to, because it's not a commercial use, and we restrict the amount of commercial you can have in a high order residential. So that's really the biggest impact here.
Yes, that is correct, because as a commercial use before they would be limited to the, you know, the floor area of a building was, I believe, 20%. So that would no longer apply because it's an institutional use.
That's awesome.
Mm-hmm.
My second question is around the temporary use that we've added. And as I understand it from reading the package, it's really around temporary use for construction activities. Am I correct in that?
Yes, mostly. And I don't think I can look up the definition and get back to it in a second, but it would be just those kinds of temporary uses. And there's definition in the bylaw about that. So it was missing from the bylaws. There was a question whether they would be permitted, but we would typically allow those kinds of uses.
Yeah, because I'd sent, there was a resident up just on the other side of Joe Howe on one of the residential streets, not Scott, but one that runs perpendicular to Scott, the first one after Joe Howe. Anyway, they were concerned because they're established residential on the street, but they back on to now high order residential. And there's a number of, as you know, there's a number of construction projects going on up there. And there was some concern around using, like tearing down a house and using that established residential zone property as kind of like a staging area for construction on the high order side. So would that be allowed under this? Because when I look at those temporary uses, it's not allowed in ER zones according to the table.
Right, let me just double check quickly. Definition. Yeah, so there's a definition 253 in the bylaw defines it as a use which in the opinion of development officers is of limited duration accessory to a development in progress, such as work camps, construction camps, work crushers, sales offices, on-strike, so tool or maintenance sheds, shipping containers that serve one of the foregoing. So it is really around construction and larger construction projects.
And looking at the table for the ER zone, they don't have any black dots. So does that mean it can't happen in an ER zone?
Yeah, so there's temporary construction use and there's also temporary use. So temporary use, I think, is what we added. So that's actually a little different. Sorry. It's associated with a holiday or special event or accessory to a permitted main use, and so there's a time limit of 180 cumulative days in duration. In other areas, it's 90 days. So there's on the Dartmouth waterfront, for example, or Halifax waterfront, that's sort of 180 days. So it could be some of those patios, for example, and it actually excludes temporary construction use. So there are actually two definitions in the bylaw. So temporary use versus temporary construction use. And
okay, so temporary construction, you could do that, but the other temporary use, the one you just mentioned, you can't do that in an ER, but you can do it in all those other zones.
Yeah, because it's more about like a patios, a special events, or little booths, so those kinds of things. So it's limited. So it's not construction, it's actually just temporary use. Mm-hmm.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Cleary, and thank you, Kasia. So Councillor Mason is up next with some questions.
Hey folks, sorry I was late. Yeah, thank you very much, staff, for the very fast turn time on these changes, and having read through it in detail last night, I think they're all very good. I did email you, Kasia, and I just read your response. I feel like there's just a small drafting thing, and I'm not going to make an amendment immediately. I would love to hear from other councillors or head nods or whatever. It does work. It's just awkward wording. And I feel like since we're here doing this, we should fix awkward wording. If you look in bullet 20, 25, 31, and 36, the amending package, right now how it reads is that for a maximum of 20% of the length of any main building facing each street line or transportation reserve, this is on the restriction of the no street wall step back being required. And then it says semicolon and B, as long as. So there's a conditional piece that says you can only do 14 meters of no street wall, and then you have to have a street wall again, which is a vast improvement over the way it is now. I think that's a really good catch to fix that. But I just think it's potentially incorrect that or not as clear that the condition of the no street wall setback in A is then subbed to a second section. Like you just strike that wording, so it would just read as facing a transportation reserve as long as, and then bullet I and II would be underneath. And maybe I can't see you all when I say this, I want to be able to see you pedantic, maybe I'm being precious, but it just seems like if we're putting this to public hearing, we should, if we see even minor errors, we should fix them. So
Mr. Chair, I would never use the word precious and talk about Councillor Mason in the same sentence, but anyhow, there's other words.
You are my mom, Tony, so thank you. So I guess could I have staff's comment on that, what the impact is, and maybe if there's a lawyer on the call, they can tell me how nervous it would make them if we actually amended that out right now.
Okay, so through the chair to Councillor Mason, I think just as I responded, I think it could work either way, and I can see that they're connected, but the word and does connect the first requirement to the sub requirements. So when you add and, you have to consider both. So I don't think there's any risk that we would miss those sub requirements. But I can see it could be probably more efficient to draft it just with one bullet versus two. But I would, it was reviewed by legal and RDO, so I would hesitate to make changes on the fly, as I say, but so I'll defer to our legal staff to
what
see
could go wrong if we start amending it right now. How
Just
about
as
this, Mr. Chair? If I could just ask, I see Ben's popped on too, but if I could just ask the clerks to make sure this bit of the conversation is very clear in the minutes, right? So that future development officers can point at this or whatever, and that it's clear what the intent is here. Ben, do you have anything to add there?
Well, it's just more of a sharing some, or I guess through the chair, share some thoughts about process, given that we're at first reading and going to a public hearing. That, like the minor wording that I think you're talking about would, I guess in my view, be considered insubstantial, like something that could be changed following the public reading. So it's something I think we could take your comments and go away, circle back to our development officers and legal staff to, either confirm that yes, Councillor Mason has it right, or there's some reason that's important and it's drafted the other way, and at the public hearing advise the council, advises council of the staff recommendation, and if needed, include a wording for a motion to make the revisions at second reading. Because as I said, in my view, I think this would be insubstantial. It's not it doesn't change the requirement at all. It's just about clarity.
All right. Well, I won't make a motion then, and I don't think it's an issue of Councillor Mason being right. It's again, it's wordsmithing, right? Like, how can you make it even gooder since we're wordsmithing? Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Mason. So Councillor Smith is up next with a question.
Thanks, Karen. I'm not going to follow Councillor Mason's wordplay over there. So just two quick questions. One is just a little bit more information on where some of the changes came from. So just the last one, amending Schedule 18 for the form, just trying to get a better understanding where that one came from. I have no issues with them, by the way. I'll just state that. It'd just be good to get a little bit of background on where they came from, either as you move forward further with design or staff requests. I'm curious where the request came from. And the clarifying definition of street wall, just curious, did that come from the industry when they started to build on their center plan, just coming back with feedback that the street wall is not clear, or staff had recognized that? So just wondering where that came from, because I feel, and I'm not a planner or architect or designer, that street wall was defined pretty well, but maybe not. So I'm just wondering why there's a little bit more further needed in that. And the last one is the second last bullet, given the maximum building dimension variation. Is this change from when we had that discussion related to a project on Godwin Street, where they thought that the tower separations would cause the building to be really slim, but I guess that was a misunderstanding of the definitions and the step backs and how those designs work. So I'm just wondering where that one came from as well. Again, no issues, just trying to get a little clarity on where those changes came from.
Okay, trying to find the text. That's through the chair to Councillor Smith. So your question on the forum, was it about the setbacks? Is that correct? The setbacks? Yeah. I think because we had fairly generous setbacks, three meters, and looking at what we need, and a little bit, I think, also about the forum design, and the parcel that the municipality may be planning to sell to help support the forum development. I think the 3 meter setbacks are proving to be a little, generous and big for the forum based on their design. So we'll give them a little more space to play, given they're already trying to provide, open space part of the site. So we felt that 1.5 meter would be, sufficient, and also support the forum redesign. So the second one for the street wall. So do you mean the street wall definition? Is that correct? The tweaks to the street wall definition? Yeah. Let me just find my place here quickly. Apologies. Well, PDF is.
And really just wondering where what made you want to give clarification? You know, you don't have to say what the clarifications are, because like that's in the text. I'm just wondering what prompted to make more clarity for that.
Yeah. So I think it's just around it's around the definition. So the original definition that's struck out in bullet 83. The street line, okay. I think it's mostly about I think it's substantially the same, except, you know, the various points, we broke them as bullets, so A, B, C. And then we also added the section, a street wall shall not apply to any wall of a building or a portion of a wall of a building that faces 100 series highways as shown in Schedule 52. So that was something that was requested by council to exempt buildings facing 100 series highways from some of the build from requirements, including a street wall. So this was just adds the clarity again that where you're facing, it's in this other section of the bylaw, but this makes it really clear that if you're facing those highways on Schedule 52, then the street wall does not apply to those buildings. So I think it was brought up by council and some of the developers as well that you know, all of those build from requirements facing the highway may not be, you know, it's not something that we typically see as a pedestrian when you're facing a highway. So providing some flexibility along those areas would support some of those projects. And the last question was about variation. Do you mean the maximum building dimension? Could you repeat the question? Which variation you're speaking to? Was it in regard to the street wall exemption as well?
Yeah, so the second last bullet, the variation. So all I'm wondering is did this clarity come from one project in particular that was the Goddison Street, where the old Derby across from the community YMCA? Because I know that they were talking about the variation in the street wall setbacks and the tower separations and how their building would be affected by the new rules. So I'm just wondering if that has any relation to what some of the architects were saying related to variations in street wall setbacks, or is this just something totally different? If it is totally different, then that's fine. You don't have to go into detail. I'm just curious if this one relates to what we heard from some of the architects who were concerned about the variation piece.
Okay, and so this is the second last bullet in the report, not in the amendments, right? In the report?
In the report, sorry, yes. In the report,
yeah, oh,
yeah.
Okay. Yeah, no, so this was actually a bit of a catch, and through the chair to councilors, my apologies. So we always had a 20% exemption in street wall, because sometimes it's, you know, you have elevator shaft or some mechanical features that just allows for some flexibility. So that's always been there. In package B, we included a variation for beyond the 64 meters. So before we really had a firm 64 meter building requirements, and now, you know, institutional buildings can be 120. We also allow in the center zones to go beyond the 64 meters, 120. So when you do the math, so 20% before at 64 meters, it was maybe only 8 or 9 meters. And now it could be quite substantive, could be actually quite a big stretch of the street wall could be without the street wall setbacks. So this actually provides a bit of additional requirements that if you are a larger building, overall, you cannot have more than 40 meters in one stretch, street wall exemption. And if you do, you have to have 14-meter street wall before you can do another, you know, exemption. So it just actually breaks up more. So it's related to the new provisions that we had in package B for larger buildings, and it kind of just makes sure that we don't have a whole big, you know, section of a building without a street wall. So it's just fine tunes the regulations where we provide more flexibility for larger buildings.
Great, thanks.
Sorry for the long explanation.
No, that helped a lot. Thanks, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Smith. Is kind of last call for this, colleagues. I don't see anyone else in the chat. I see a head shake from Councillor Mancini. I guess we could have a call for the question then. Questions called. So all those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? So that's unanimous. So thank you, colleagues. Thank you, staff. So moving along, since that was our only other item, Ms. Clerk, we have no one signed up for public participation, I assume?
Nobody had signed up for public participation.
Thank you. So then that brings us to adjournment. So colleagues, we will meet again soon because we will actually have a public hearing to handle here at Regional Center. So I don't have the date for that in front of me, but we'll get back to you on that one.
I'm thinking like the Friday before Labor Day or the, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding.
It will be sometime in September, Councillor Mason.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, colleagues. Thank you,
Thanks,
staff.
everyone.
Have a great day.